A female millionaire finds two lost little girls begging for help, and one of them asks, "Do you know our daddy?" Before we dive in, whether you're having your morning coffee or winding down for the night, you're exactly where you need to. The winter storm hit Boston like a wall of ice and fury, turning the city into a frozen wasteland. Snow swirled in thick, blinding sheets as the wind howled through empty streets. Inside her sleek black limousine, Sophia Blackwell pressed her manicured fingers against the cold window, watching the world disappear into white chaos. At 48, Sophia commanded respect in every boardroom she entered. As CEO of Blackwell Industries, she'd built an empire worth billions. But tonight, none of that mattered. Her limousine had broken down in front of the abandoned Westfield shopping center, and even her wealth couldn't fix a dead engine in the middle of a blizzard. "Ma'am, the mechanic won't be able to get here for at least 2 hours," her driver called, from the front seat, his voice tight with concern. Sophia sighed, pulling her designer coat tighter. Her mansion waited for her, empty, pristine, and silent as always. No family photos adorned the walls. No children's laughter echoed through the halls. Just her alone with her success and her ghosts. That's when she heard it. A sound that cut through the storm like a knife through silk. Crying. Desperate, heartbroken sobs that made something deep in her chest tighten. "Do you hear that?" She asked her driver. "Hear what, ma'am?" But Sophia was already opening the door, stepping into the biting cold. The wind immediately stole her breath, but she pressed forward, following the sound to the entrance of the abandoned shopping center. There, huddled against the glass doors like two lost angels, were twin girls. They couldn't have been more than 5 years old, their small bodies shaking with cold and fear. Their dark hair whipped around their faces, and their eyes, those impossibly blue eyes, looked up at her with a mixture of hope and terror. The braver of the two stepped forward, her chin trembling but her voice steady. "Please, lady, do you know where our daddy is?" The question hit Sophia like lightning. Those exact words, spoken in that same hopeful tone, echoed from her past. Her Aunt Maria used to ask the same thing when showing her old photographs, always wondering about the father who'd left before Sophia was born. "What are your names?" Sophia asked, kneeling down despite her expensive suit. "I'm Emma," the brave one said, "and this is Grace. We're looking for our daddy. Our Aunt Maria said he was important and that he could fly." Something stirred in Sophia's chest, something she'd buried years ago under corporate takeovers and quarterly reports. These girls were alone, abandoned and asking for help, and for the first time in decades, Sophia Blackwell felt her heart crack open. But who was their father? And why did looking at them feel like staring into a mirror of her own past? Sophia couldn't leave them there. Every instinct screamed that she should call the authorities, hand over the responsibility to someone qualified. But as she looked into those frightened blue eyes, something deeper than logic took control. "Come on, girls, let's get you warm," she heard herself saying, leading Emma and Grace to her limousine. Her driver's eyes widened in the rearview mirror as two small, snow-covered children climbed into the back seat of the pristine vehicle. "Ma'am, should I call?" "Just drive us home, Thomas," Sophia interrupted, wrapping her coat around both girls. They pressed against her, seeking warmth and comfort, and she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the desperate need to protect someone other than herself. During the drive through the storm, the girls' story emerged in broken whispers. Their Aunt Maria had died 3 days ago in a car accident. They'd been placed in a temporary group home, but Emma had overheard the social workers talking about separating them. "They said Grace and me might go to different families," Emma explained, her small hand gripping Sophia's. "But we can't be apart. We promised Aunt Maria we'd always stay together." Grace, the quieter twin, finally spoke up. "Aunt Maria showed us a picture once. A man who looked like Grace. She said he was our daddy, but he went to heaven before we were born." When they arrived at the Blackwell mansion, Sophia's housekeeper Margaret nearly dropped her tea tray. In 30 years of service, she'd never seen her employer bring home anything more personal than business files. "Margaret, could you prepare the blue guest room? And perhaps find something warm for the girls to eat?" The older woman stared at Sophia as if she'd grown a second head. The infamous Ice Queen of Boston's business district was gently brushing snow from a child's hair, speaking in soft tones she'd never used before. As the girls explored their temporary room with wonder, Grace marveling at the four-poster bed while Emma examined the expensive artwork, Sophia made calls to her legal team. "Emergency guardianship papers," she demanded. "Temporary custody until the situation could be properly sorted. Ms. Blackwell," her chief attorney's voice crackled through the phone. "This is highly irregular. You have no legal standing, no background. Checks, no. Make it happen, Harrison, whatever it takes." Later that night, as she tucked the girls into beds that had never been slept in, Emma grabbed her hand. "Are you going to send us away tomorrow?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sophia looked down at these two small faces, so full of hope and fear, and realized she was standing at a crossroads. She could return to her safe, controlled world of boardrooms and profit margins, or she could step into something terrifying and unknown. "No, sweetheart, not tomorrow." But as she turned off the lights and heard their whispered goodnights, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a decision that would change everything. The girls looked so familiar, especially Grace with that crooked smile that reminded her of someone important, someone she'd lost. Who was their father? And why did she feel like she already knew the answer? The next morning brought chaos Sophia had never imagined. At 6 a.m., she found both girls in her kitchen, Emma standing on a chair trying to reach the cereal cabinet, while Grace sat cross-legged on the marble floor, drawing with crayons on the back of important business documents. "We're making breakfast," Emma announced proudly, having successfully retrieved a box of cornflakes that was now scattered across the pristine countertop. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of horror and amusement. "Perhaps I should handle breakfast, Miss Blackwell." For the first time in her adult life, Sophia called in sick to work. The boardroom could wait. She had more pressing matters. Like discovering that 5-year-olds couldn't wear business suits to school, and that cartoon-printed underwear was apparently a necessity, not a luxury. The shopping trip to Boston's finest children's boutique became an adventure in itself. Emma gravitated toward bright colors and anything with sparkles, while Grace preferred softer hues and clothes that wouldn't restrict her movement for drawing. Sophia found herself learning a new language, one filled with terms like play clothes and indoor shoes. "Why don't you have any kids?" Emma asked bluntly while trying on a purple dress with rainbow stripes. The question caught Sophia off guard. I was always too busy with work." "That's sad," Grace said quietly, not looking up from the coloring book she'd found. "Aunt Maria said families are the most important work." At the pediatrician's office, Dr. Sarah Chen examined both girls thoroughly. They were healthy, but showed signs of recent stress. Emma had developed a nervous habit of twisting her hair, while Grace had been having nightmares. "They've been through trauma," Dr. Chen explained privately to Sophia. "Lost their primary caregiver, placed in unfamiliar surroundings, separated from everything they knew. What they need now is stability and patience." Stability. The word echoed in Sophia's mind as she enrolled the girls at Brookline Academy, Boston's most prestigious elementary school. The headmistress, Mrs. Wellington, raised her eyebrows when Sophia couldn't answer basic questions about the girls' academic history or behavioral patterns. "I'm still learning," Sophia admitted, a phrase she'd never spoken in any business context. That evening, homework became a revelation. Emma struggled with math but created elaborate stories to go with simple reading assignments. Grace solved mathematical problems with ease but became frustrated when asked to write about her feelings. "I don't like talking about sad things," Grace whispered when Sophia tried to help with a journal assignment about family memories. "That's okay, sweetheart. We'll figure it out together." Margaret, who had initially viewed the girls as temporary disruptions, found herself softening. She caught Emma trying to help with dinner preparation, standing on her tiptoes to stir a pot of soup. "Aunt Maria taught us that everyone should help," Emma explained seriously. "She said it makes families stronger." As bedtime approached, Sophia realized she knew nothing about children's routines. Were baths mandatory every night? How many books was too many for bedtime stories? And why did Grace insist on checking the locks on all the doors before sleeping? We always checked with Aunt Maria, Grace explained, to make sure no one could take us away while we were sleeping. The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. These children had lived with the constant fear of abandonment, and now they were trusting her with their safety. That night, after the girls were asleep, Sophia stood in her home office staring at family photos she'd ignored for years. There was David, her twin brother, grinning at the camera during a family vacation 20 years ago. Something about his smile reminded her of Grace's crooked grin. But David had died 6 years ago in that helicopter crash. It was impossible, wasn't it? The front door of the Blackwell mansion slammed with such force that the crystal chandelier trembled. Catherine Blackwell stormed through the foyer, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. At 42, she was everything Sophia was. Brilliant, ruthless, and accustomed to getting her way. What the hell is this? Catherine's voice echoed through the house as she waved a gossip magazine featuring a grainy photo of Sophia shopping, with 2 small children. The headline read, "Ice Queen Melts, Blackwell CEO's Mystery Children." Sophia emerged from the living room where she'd been helping Grace with a puzzle. "Catherine, lower your voice. The girls are..." "The girls?" Catherine's perfectly manicured eyebrows shot up. "Sophia, have you completely lost your mind? I leave for 2 weeks in Tokyo, and I come back to find you playing house with random children?" Emma peered around the corner, her blue eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Catherine's gaze fell on her, and for a moment something flickered across her face. Recognition, perhaps, or shock. "Go upstairs with Grace, sweetheart," Sophia said gently to Emma. "I need to talk with Aunt Catherine." When the girls were gone, Catherine exploded. "Aunt Catherine, Sophia, do you hear yourself? These children aren't our responsibility. We built Blackwell Industries from nothing after David died. We sacrificed everything, our personal lives, our relationships, our chance, at normal families, to honor his memory and create this empire." "Maybe that was the mistake," Sophia replied quietly. "Mistake?" Catherine's voice rose to a dangerous pitch. 6 years ago, when David died in that crash, we promised each other we'd keep his legacy alive. The company is his legacy, Sophia. Not some random children you picked up in a snowstorm. They're not random. Of course they are. You don't know anything about them. Their background, their family, their medical history, nothing. You've put our entire company at risk for, what? Some midlife crisis maternal instinct? Sophia felt her own temper flaring. "The company will survive me taking a few days off." "Will it?" "The board called me in Tokyo, Sophia. They're concerned about your recent instability. Stock prices are down 8% since news of these children broke. Our investors are questioning your judgment." From upstairs came the sound of Grace coughing, a lingering effect from her time in the cold. Both sisters looked up instinctively, but Catherine caught herself first. "Listen to yourself," Catherine continued, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You're more concerned about some sick kid than about the billion-dollar company that employs thousands of people. Her name is Grace. I don't care what her name is. This isn't you, Sophia. You're the woman who fired an entire department to save the company after the 2019 market crash. You're the CEO who never let emotion cloud business judgment. What happened to that woman?" Sophia looked at her sister, really looked at her. Catherine's designer suit was immaculate, her makeup perfect, her expression hard as steel. She looked exactly like Sophia had looked 3 days ago, before 2 frightened children had cracked open something she'd thought was permanently sealed. "Maybe that woman was broken," Sophia said quietly. Catherine stepped closer, her voice urgent. "They have to go, Sophia, tomorrow. I've already contacted the Department of Children and Families. There's a very nice foster family in Cambridge who..." "No. This isn't negotiable. I'm COO of this company, and I won't let you destroy everything we've built for a fantasy of motherhood that you decided to pursue at 48. It's not a fantasy, Catherine. Those girls need us. We don't need them. We have each other. We have the company. We have David's memory to protect. That's our family." That night, after a tense dinner where Catherine barely acknowledged the girl's existence, Sophia overheard her sister on the phone in the study. "Yes, I need a comprehensive background check. Emma and Grace Martinez. I don't care what it costs. Everything. Their parents, their aunt, any family connections. And Robert, I need this fast. Sophia's blood ran cold. Catherine was investigating the girls behind her back. But as she listened from the doorway, she realized her sister was asking the same questions that had been haunting her. Who were Emma and Grace Martinez? And why did they seem so familiar? 3 days later, Sophia couldn't ignore what she was seeing. Grace had a habit of tilting her head when concentrating, exactly the way David used to during chess matches. Emma's laugh, bright and uninhibited, echoed through the mansion with the same musical quality their father had possessed before his death. "Look what I made." Emma burst into Sophia's office, holding up a crayon drawing of a man with wings, standing next to a tall building. "Aunt Maria used to tell us stories about our daddy. She said he could fly like a superhero." Sophia's breath caught. "What else did she tell you about him?" "That he was very important and helped lots of people," Grace added softly from the doorway, "and that if he was still alive, he would have taken care of Mommy when she was sick." "Your mommy was sick?" The girls exchanged a look, one of those wordless communications that twins share. Emma nodded solemnly. "She had the cough that doesn't go away. Aunt Maria said Daddy would have made sure she got the best doctors, but he went to heaven before we were born." That evening, after the girls were asleep, Sophia made a call she'd been putting off. Robert Chen was Boston's most discreet private investigator, a former police detective who specialized in family histories. "For wealthy clients, I need you to find out everything about 2 girls named Emma and Grace Martinez," she said, keeping her voice low. "Their deceased aunt was Maria Martinez, and their mother was Sarah Martinez. I need to know about their father." "How deep do you want me to dig, Miss Blackwell?" "All the way to the bottom." Meanwhile, Catherine was conducting her own investigation. She'd spent hours poring over corporate insurance records, searching for any connection between the Martinez family and Blackwell Industries. Her assistant had compiled a thick folder of information, but so far nothing made sense. "Ma'am," her assistant said hesitantly, "I did find something odd. Sarah Martinez worked as a nurse at Boston General Hospital until about 7 years ago. She left suddenly and never returned to nursing." Catherine's eyes sharpened. Boston General was where David had been treated after his car accident in 2018, a minor crash that had left him with a concussion and a few broken ribs. He'd spent 3 days in the hospital, complaining about the fuss everyone was making. "Get me Sarah Martinez's employment records from the hospital," Catherine ordered. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Eleanor Chen, Grace's teacher at Brookline Academy, requested a conference. "Grace is extraordinary," Mrs. Chen began carefully. "Her aptitude for science and mathematics is well beyond her age level, but she's also asking some unusual questions." "What kind of questions?" "Yesterday she asked if her daddy might be watching her from heaven while she's doing experiments. When I asked her about her father, she said Aunt Maria told her he was someone who studied the world to save it, and that he traveled to places where the ice was melting." Sophia's heart began pounding. David had been passionate about climate change research. His final expedition, the one that killed him, had been to document Arctic ice melting patterns. Did she say anything else? She mentioned that her daddy had dark hair like hers and that he smiled with one side of his mouth higher than the other. Mrs. Chen paused. "Ms. Blackwell, Grace has that exact same crooked smile." That afternoon, Sophia found herself in David's old room, which she'd kept exactly as he'd left it. His research notes were still scattered across the desk. His environmental science books still lined the shelves. She picked up a photo from his graduation from MIT, him grinning at the camera with that distinctive lopsided smile that Grace had inherited. Emma appeared in the doorway, clutching a stuffed elephant. "Is that our daddy?" Sophia's hands trembled as she looked at the photo, then at Emma's expectant face. The resemblance wasn't just in Grace's smile. Emma had David's determined chin, his intelligent eyes. I don't know, sweetheart. Aunt Maria said we'd know him when we saw him," Emma said matter-of-factly. "She said family looks like family." That night, Catherine confronted Sophia with her findings. Sarah Martinez was David's nurse in 2018. They had contact for 8 months after his discharge. Hospital records show she visited him several times, and there are credit card receipts showing he took her to dinner at least 6 times. That doesn't prove... It proves they had a relationship, Sophia. And it proves you've been lying to yourself about who these girls might be. But as Catherine spoke, Sophia realized her sister looked pale, almost frightened. What else did you find? Catherine hesitated. David visited a fertility clinic 3 months before he died. The records are sealed, but... She took a shaky breath. What if he preserved genetic material? What if Sarah used it after his death? The words hung between them like a loaded weapon. If it was true, then Emma and Grace weren't just random children Sophia had rescued from a snowstorm. They were David's daughters. They were family. The Blackwell Industries boardroom had never felt more hostile. 12 faces stared at Sophia across the polished mahogany table, their expressions ranging from concerned to openly disapproving. At the head of the table, board, Chairman Harold Morrison cleared his throat ominously. Sophia, we need to address the elephant in the room, Morrison began, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years in corporate leadership. Your recent personal developments are affecting company performance and investor confidence. Sophia straightened in her chair, summoning the ice-cold composure that had built her reputation. My personal life has never interfered with my professional obligations, hasn't it? Board member Janet Reeves slid a tablet across the table. Stock prices have dropped 12% in 2 weeks. The Henderson acquisition fell through because you missed 3 crucial meetings, and this morning's Wall Street Journal article questioning your stability has our Tokyo partners reconsidering the manufacturing deal. Catherine sat at Sophia's right, her face a mask of professional neutrality. But Sophia could feel her sister's tension. This was exactly what Catherine had warned would happen. Furthermore, Morrison continued, rumors about your adoption of unknown children have raised questions about potential liability issues. What if these children have medical problems? What if their biological family surfaces with claims against the company? The girls are not a liability, Sophia said firmly, aren't they? Another board member, Richard Blackstone, leaned forward. You've been CEO for 8 years, Sophia. You've never taken a sick day, never let personal matters affect business decisions. Now suddenly you're canceling meetings to take children shopping, missing conference calls for parent-teacher meetings. The accusation stung because it was partially true. Yesterday she'd left a crucial budget meeting when the school nurse called, because Grace had fallen on the playground. The scraped knee hadn't been serious, but the fear in Grace's voice over the phone had sent Sophia rushing out of the building without explanation. Perhaps, Morrison said carefully, you should consider taking a temporary leave of absence. Let Catherine assume CEO responsibilities until you've resolved your personal situation. The suggestion hit the room like a bomb. Sophia saw Catherine's knuckles whiten as her sister gripped her pen, but her face remained impassive. That won't be necessary, Sophia replied, her voice deadly quiet. Won't it? Reeves pulled out another document. The children's school called the company yesterday looking for you during the Morrison Industries merger presentation. Your housekeeper has been fielding calls from social workers during business hours, and according to security, you've been leaving the office at 3 p.m. every day to pick up the girls from school. Since when do board members monitor my daily schedule? Since your daily schedule started affecting quarterly projections, Morrison snapped. That evening, the confrontation continued at home. Catherine found Sophia in the kitchen, helping Emma with homework while Grace practiced piano in the next room. They're right, you know, Catherine said quietly, watching Emma struggle with multiplication tables. This can't continue. What can't continue? Me caring about something other than profit margins? You caring more about these children than about the company David died trying to protect? Emma looked up from her worksheet, sensing the tension. Are you fighting about us? No, sweetheart, Sophia said quickly, but Catherine's expression remained hard. Actually, yes, we are, Catherine said bluntly. Emma, your presence here is causing problems for Sophia's work. Important problems. Catherine? Sophia's voice was sharp with warning, but Emma's blue eyes filled with understanding beyond her years. "We're making trouble for you," she said to Sophia. "Just like at the group home. They said we were too much work too." "That's not. Maybe we should go," Grace said from the doorway, having overheard. "We don't want to make you lose your job, like Aunt Maria lost hers when she had to take care of us." The words hit Sophia like physical blows. These children, who had already lost everyone they'd ever loved, were prepared to sacrifice their own happiness to protect her. "You're not going anywhere," Sophia said firmly, kneeling down to Emma's level. "Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever." But, as she spoke, she caught Catherine's reflection in the window. Her sister's face was a mask of cold calculation, and Sophia realized the board meeting had been just the beginning. Catherine was planning something, and whatever it was, Sophia suspected it would force her to choose between the girls and everything she'd spent her life building. The DNA testing facility on Beacon Street was sterile and impersonal, exactly the kind of place that dealt in cold, scientific facts rather than warm family hopes. Sophia sat in the waiting room, watching Emma color while Grace read a picture book about marine animals. "Why do we have to spit in the tubes?" Emma asked, wrinkling her nose at the memory of the saliva collection. "It's just to answer some questions," Sophia replied, though her own stomach churned with anxiety. After sleepless nights wrestling with doubt and desperate hope, she'd decided she needed to know the truth. Catherine had been surprisingly supportive of the testing, even offering to drive them to the appointment. "It's the logical thing to do," she'd said. "Once we have scientific proof, we can move forward appropriately." Dr. Harrison Webb, Catherine's longtime family physician, had recommended this particular lab for its discretion and speed. "Results in 48 hours, he'd promised, "and complete confidentiality." What Sophia didn't know was that Dr. Webb was drowning in gambling debts from his weekend trips to Foxwoods Casino. When Catherine had privately approached him with an envelope containing $50,000 and a simple request to ensure the results reflect reality rather than wishful thinking, he'd seen it as divine intervention. The call came on a Thursday morning while Sophia was reviewing quarterly reports in her office. Her hands shook as she answered the phone. "Ms. Blackwell? Dr. Webb here with your DNA results. I'm afraid there's no genetic relationship between you and the children. The probability of familial connection is less than 0.01%. The words hit her like ice water. That's impossible. The physical resemblances, the mannerisms." "Sometimes we see what we want to see," Dr. Webb said gently, though his voice carried the strain of his deception. "I'm sorry, Ms. Blackwell. These children are not related to your family." That evening, Catherine found Sophia staring out her office window. The test results spread across her desk like an indictment. "I'm sorry, Sophia," Catherine said, though her voice carried more relief than sympathy. "I know you wanted them to be David's daughters, but wishful thinking doesn't change biology." But Grace's smile, Emma's laugh, coincidences. "You've been under enormous stress since taking them in. Sometimes our minds create connections that aren't really there." Sophia looked at the clinical language of the report. No genetic markers consistent with familial relationship detected. The words blurred as tears she hadn't shed in years threatened to fall. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now we can make rational decisions based on facts instead of emotions," Catherine said firmly. "The girls need proper placement with a family, equipped to handle children permanently. And you need to focus on saving the company before the board votes you out." But even as Catherine spoke, Sophia's eyes kept drifting to the framed photo on her desk. David laughing at last year's company picnic, his face lit with the same joy she saw in Emma every morning at breakfast. "Something's wrong," Sophia said, suddenly. "I can feel it." "The only thing wrong is that you've let your emotions override your judgment," Catherine replied. "The test doesn't lie, Sophia. Science doesn't lie." That night, as Sophia tucked the girls into bed, Emma grabbed her hand with surprising strength. "Are you sad because we're not really your family?" Emma asked. The question pierced straight through Sophia's heart. "Who told you that?" "Nobody had to tell us," Grace said quietly. We can feel when people don't want us anymore. As Sophia looked into their trusting faces, she realized something Catherine hadn't considered. Even if the DNA test was accurate, it didn't change how she felt about these children. Biology or not, they had become hers in every way that mattered. But the nagging doubt remained. Why did they look so much like David if they weren't his daughters? Robert Chen had built his reputation on finding answers that others missed. The private investigator sat across from Sophia in his cluttered office, a thick manila folder between them containing 3 weeks of careful research. Sarah Martinez was more than just a nurse at Boston General, Chen began, opening the folder to reveal hospital employment records. She worked in the trauma unit from 2015 to 2018. Excellent reviews, dedicated employee, but she left abruptly in October 2018 and never returned to nursing. Sophia leaned forward. October 2018, that's 2 months after David's accident. Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Chen pulled out a series of photographs. These are security camera images from the hospital's main entrance. Your brother visited Sarah Martinez at her apartment 6 times between his discharge and her resignation. The grainy images showed David's unmistakable silhouette entering a modest apartment building in Dorchester. Sophia's heart hammered as she recognized the purposeful way he walked, the same stride Emma had inherited. Were they dating? More than dating. According to her former neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, Sarah was deeply in love with David. She talked about him constantly, called him the most passionate man she'd ever met about environmental issues. Chen flipped to another document. Here's the crucial piece. 3 weeks before David left for his final Arctic expedition, he made a significant deposit at Boston Fertility Solutions. Sophia's breath caught. Fertility Solutions? He preserved genetic material, Ms. Blackwell. The clinic's records show he listed it as insurance for future family planning and named Sarah Martinez as the authorized recipient in case of his death. The room seemed to spin. David never wanted children. He always said his work was too dangerous, too demanding. People change, Ms. Blackwell. According to the clinic's counselor notes, David was planning to propose to Sarah when he returned from the Arctic. He wanted to have children with her, but not until he completed what he called one last dangerous assignment. Chen continued methodically. Sarah used David's genetic material 24 months after his death. She was 32, financially stable from a lawsuit settlement after a medical malpractice case at the hospital, and desperately wanted to honor David's memory by having his children. But why didn't she tell us? Why keep it secret? Because David had made her promise. According to a letter I found in Sarah's safety deposit box, which her sister Maria maintained, David explicitly told Sarah that if anything happened to him, she should only contact his family if she absolutely needed help. He didn't want to burden the Blackwells with obligations to children they never knew existed. Sophia stared at a photograph of Sarah Martinez, a beautiful woman with kind eyes and dark hair like her daughter's. In the photo, she was laughing at something off camera, her hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. Sarah developed ovarian cancer when the girls were 3, Chen continued quietly. She fought it for 2 years, but the treatments were expensive and exhausting. Her sister Maria took over caring for Emma and Grace during Sarah's final months. And Maria died in a car accident 3 weeks ago, leaving the girls with no one who knew their true heritage. Sarah had planned to tell them about David when they were older, but cancer took that choice away from her. Chen pulled out the final document, Sarah's handwritten letter never sent, dated 3 days before David's departure for the Arctic. My dearest David, Sophia read aloud, her voice breaking. I know you're afraid of leaving children behind, if something happens to you. But love isn't a burden, it's a gift. If I use what you've given me and something happens to you, I promise our children will know they were created from the deepest love 2 people could share. Tears fell onto the letter as Sophia realized the magnitude of Catherine's deception. The DNA test had been wrong, or worse, deliberately falsified. Emma and Grace weren't just random children she'd rescued from a snowstorm. They were David's daughters, her nieces, her family. And Catherine had known all along. Saturday morning in Franklin Park should have been perfect. The autumn air was crisp, the leaves painted brilliant shades of gold and crimson, and for the first time in weeks, Sophia felt genuinely peaceful watching Emma chase squirrels while Grace collected interesting rocks for her nature collection. "Look, Aunt Sophia," Grace called out using the title that had evolved naturally over the past month. "This one has sparkles in it." But as Grace bent to examine another specimen, she suddenly swayed and crumpled to the ground like a deflated balloon. "Grace." Sophia ran to where the little girl lay motionless on the grass, her face pale as winter snow. "Grace, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Emma's scream pierced the park's tranquility. "What's wrong with her? Wake up, Grace, wake up." Sophia's hands shook as she checked Grace's pulse. Weak, but steady. Her breathing was shallow, and when Sophia lifted her eyelids, the pupils were responsive but unfocused. "Call 911, she shouted to a jogger who had stopped to help. Within minutes, sirens wailed through the park as paramedics loaded Grace's unconscious form into an ambulance. At Boston Children's Hospital, Dr. Amanda Rodriguez delivered news that shattered Sophia's world. "Grace has acute lymphoblastic leukemia," she explained gently in the consultation room while Grace slept in the pediatric ICU. "It's a cancer of the blood and bone marrow. The good news is that it's highly treatable in children, especially when caught early." "Treatable how?" Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. "Intensive chemotherapy, possibly radiation, and we'll need to find a compatible bone marrow donor. Family members are often the best matches." Sophia's heart lurched. "What about Emma?" "They're twins, fraternal twins, which means they're no more genetically similar than regular siblings. We've already tested Emma, but she's not compatible for bone marrow transplant." That evening, as Grace slept surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed with mechanical vigilance, Sophia made the call she'd been dreading. "Catherine, I need you to come to the hospital. Grace has leukemia and she needs a bone marrow donor." The silence on the other end stretched for long seconds. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Catherine arrived, her face was ashen. She looked at Grace's tiny form connected to IV lines and monitors, and something cracked in her composed facade. "How bad is it?" "She needs chemotherapy immediately and eventually a bone marrow transplant. The doctors want to test both of us as potential donors." Catherine nodded without argument. For the first time since the girls had entered their lives, she seemed to see them as more than obstacles to corporate success. The next morning brought Dr. Rodriguez's test results. "I'm sorry, but neither of you is compatible for bone marrow donation. Grace's HLA tissue type requires a very specific match." "What happens now?" Sophia asked, watching Emma sleep curled up in the chair beside Grace's bed, refusing to leave her sister's side. "We start chemotherapy immediately to put the leukemia into remission. Meanwhile, we search the National Bone Marrow Registry for a compatible donor. With 10 million registered donors, we have good odds of finding a match." But as Dr. Rodriguez spoke, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about Robert Chen's findings. If Emma and Grace really were David's daughters, then Catherine and Sophia should have been potential matches as aunts. The fact that neither of them was compatible raised a troubling question. "Doctor, how accurate are the tissue typing tests?" "Extremely accurate. Why do you ask?" Sophia looked at Catherine, who had gone very pale. "Just wondering about the science behind it all." That night, as Grace began her first round of chemotherapy, Emma climbed into Sophia's lap in the hospital's family lounge. "Is Grace going to die like Mommy and Aunt Maria?" Emma's question was matter of fact, but her blue eyes were filled with terror. "No, sweetheart. The doctors are going to make her better." "Promise?" Sophia looked through the window, at Grace's room, where her brave little niece was fighting for her life, and made the only promise she could. "I promise we'll do everything possible to keep her safe." But privately, she wondered if Catherine's manipulation had cost them crucial time that could have saved Grace's life. Robert Chen's urgent phone call came at 2 a.m. while Sophia dozed in, the uncomfortable hospital chair beside Grace's bed. Her phone buzzed against the silence of the pediatric ward, where Grace slept fitfully between chemotherapy treatments. "Ms. Blackwell, I found something you need to see immediately." Chen's voice was tight with excitement. I'm at Sarah Martinez's former apartment building. The landlord just discovered a storage unit that Maria Martinez had been paying for since Sarah's death. Sophia looked at Grace's pale face, then at Emma curled up on the fold-out cot the nurses had provided. Can't this wait until morning? Trust me, you'll want to see this now. An hour later, Sophia stood in a cramped storage unit in Dorchester, watching Chen unlock a metal filing cabinet with keys he'd obtained from Maria's effects. Inside were carefully organized folders containing Sarah's most precious possessions. She documented everything, Chen said, pulling out a thick manila envelope labeled, "For Emma and Grace," about their father. With trembling hands, Sophia opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of photographs. David and Sarah at a small Italian restaurant, walking along the harbor, David laughing at something Sarah had said. But it was the medical documents underneath that made Sophia's knees weak. Boston Fertility Solutions, she read aloud. Genetic Material Preservation Agreement, dated September 15, 2018. Donor, David Michael Blackwell. Authorized recipient, Sarah Elena Martinez. Chen handed her another document. Authorization for posthumous use signed by both David and Sarah 3 days before his departure. But the most devastating evidence was Sarah's handwritten journal, documenting her pregnancy and the girl's early years. Entry after entry described David's mannerisms appearing in his daughters, Grace's analytical mind and love of science, Emma's fearless nature and artistic creativity. December 3, 2020, Sophia read from one entry. Grace asked why she has brown hair like me but blue eyes like nobody in our family. I told her she has her daddy's eyes. Someday I'll tell her about the man who loved the earth so much he died trying to save it. The final piece of evidence was a sealed letter addressed to the Blackwell family, to be opened only if my daughters need help. Sarah had written it during her final weeks, knowing she was dying. I never intended for David's family to feel obligated to care for Emma and Grace, the letter read. But if something happens to Maria and me, please know that these girls are David's greatest legacy. They carry his compassion, his intelligence, and his determination to make the world better. Sophia's phone rang as she finished reading. Catherine's name flashed on the screen. Where are you? Catherine's voice was sharp with worry. The hospital called looking for you. I found proof, Catherine. Emma and Grace are David's daughters. The DNA test was wrong. The silence stretched so long that Sophia wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Catherine spoke, her voice barely audible. Come home. We need to talk. When Sophia returned to the hospital an hour later, she found Dr. Rodriguez waiting with unexpected news. We found a compatible bone marrow donor, she announced. A teacher in Seattle. Perfect HLA match. We can schedule the transplant as soon as Grace is strong enough. As Sophia held Emma and looked at Grace sleeping peacefully for the first time, in days she felt something shift inside her chest. These weren't just children she'd rescued, they were David's daughters, her nieces, her family by blood and choice. But the question remained. If they really were David's children, why hadn't Catherine tested as a compatible donor? And why had the original DNA test shown no familial relationship? The answer, Sophia suspected, would reveal the depths of her sister's deception. And tomorrow, she would demand the truth. The real truth, this time. Margaret Torres had worked for the Blackwell family for 30 years, and in all that time she'd never betrayed a confidence. But watching Grace fight for her life in that hospital bed had awakened something in the loyal housekeeper that overrode decades of discretion. She found Sophia in the hospital cafeteria at dawn, staring at untouched coffee while Emma slept in. Her lap. Ms. Blackwell, Margaret said quietly, sliding into the opposite chair. There's something I need to tell you about Ms. Catherine and those DNA tests. Sophia looked up, noting the guilt etched deep in Margaret's weathered face. What? About them? I helped her, Margaret whispered, her voice thick with shame. God forgive me. I helped her switch those samples before they went to the lab. The coffee cup slipped from Sophia's hands, clattering against the table. What? She told me it was for the best, that you were having some kind of breakdown, and couldn't think clearly. She said the girls would be better off with a proper family, and that you'd destroy the company if you kept them. Sophia's vision blurred with rage. Tell me exactly what happened. The morning after you collected the samples, Ms. Catherine asked me to retrieve them from your office before the courier arrived. She said she wanted to add her own sample for comparison. But instead, Margaret's voice broke. She threw your samples away and substituted them with samples from 2 children at her charity foundation's Christmas party. You have proof of this? Margaret pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I recorded the conversation. I was worried about liability for the company, so I always record unusual requests. I never thought. She pressed play. Catherine's voice filled the small space between them. Margaret, I need you to understand that those DNA samples cannot show a family connection. Sophia's judgment is compromised, and she'll ruin everything if she believes those children are David's daughters. We're protecting her from making a catastrophic mistake. Sophia closed her eyes as the recording continued, her sister's voice cold and calculating as she detailed the deception. Replace the samples with the Martinez children's saliva and with samples from unrelated children. Dr. Webb will handle the rest at the lab. Dr. Webb was in on this? She's paying his gambling debts, Margaret admitted. I heard her on the phone, with someone at Foxwoods Casino arranging payment for his markers. The betrayal cut deeper than Sophia had imagined possible. Catherine hadn't just lied about the DNA tests. She'd orchestrated an elaborate deception involving multiple people, all to keep Emma and Grace away from their rightful family. There's more, Margaret continued. When Grace got sick, Ms. Catherine researched her condition. She knows that as David's daughters, the girls would inherit significant portions of the company when they turn 18. She's been planning to have them declared wards of the state, and their inheritance rights terminated. Sophia's hands clenched into fists. She was willing to let Grace die to protect her corporate interests. She didn't think Grace would actually die. She just thought, if the girls were in foster care dealing with medical issues, they'd be too overwhelmed to ever pursue inheritance claims. That afternoon, Sophia confronted Catherine in the hospital's family lounge, the recording device hidden in her purse. I know what you did, Sophia said without preamble. Catherine's face went white, but her voice remained steady. I don't know what you mean. The DNA samples, Dr. Webb, the gambling debts. I know everything, Catherine. For a long moment, Catherine stared at her sister, then her shoulders sagged in defeat. I was protecting us, protecting the company David died for. You were protecting yourself. Those girls will inherit 40% of Blackwell Industries when they turn 18. Do you understand what that means? Everything we've built, everything David sacrificed for, will be controlled by children who never knew him. They're his daughters. They're financial liabilities. Catherine's mask finally slipped, revealing the calculating woman beneath. I've spent 6 years building this company into David's perfect memorial. I won't let some dead nurse's children destroy his legacy. But as Catherine spoke, neither sister noticed Emma standing in the doorway, her blue eyes wide with understanding far beyond her years. You tried to get rid of us, Emma said quietly, just like everyone else. Emma, sweetheart, come here, Sophia said gently, but the little girl backed away, her face crumpling with betrayal. You all hate us, Emma whispered. That's why Grace is sick. That's why bad things always happen to us. Catherine started to speak, but Sophia silenced her with a look that could have frozen fire. She knelt down to Emma's level, her heart breaking at the fear in those familiar blue eyes. Emma, listen to me. Aunt Catherine made a terrible mistake, but I will never, ever let anyone take you and Grace away from me. Do you understand? But, she said, she was wrong. You and Grace belong with me. You're my family. 3 days later, Grace underwent the bone marrow transplant. The donor, a kindergarten teacher named Lisa Chen from Seattle, had flown across the country to personally ensure the procedure's success. It's rare for donors to meet recipients, Dr. Rodriguez explained as Lisa sat beside Grace's bed, reading stories during the long recovery hours. But when Lisa learned Grace was only 7 and had no parents, she insisted on being here. Emma rarely left Grace's side during the grueling weeks that followed. When Grace was too weak from treatment to speak, Emma would whisper stories about their future, about the room they'd share in Sophia's house forever, about the art classes Emma would teach Grace, about the marine biology books Grace would read to Emma. "You can't die," Emma told her sister during one particularly difficult night when Grace's fever spiked dangerously high. "I already lost Mommy and Aunt Maria. I can't lose you too." Catherine, meanwhile, faced the consequences of her deception. Federal investigators had been called in after Margaret's testimony revealed the extent of the fraud. Dr. Webb had already lost his medical license and faced criminal charges for falsifying medical records. "I'll resign from all positions at Blackwell Industries," Catherine told Sophia during one of their tense hospital conversations. "I'll set up a trust fund for Grace's medical expenses and future care. Just, please don't press criminal charges." "The criminal charges aren't mine to drop," Sophia replied coldly. "But the girls' inheritance rights are non-negotiable. They're David's daughters, and they'll receive everything that's rightfully theirs." The real breakthrough came during Grace's 3rd week of recovery. Emma had fallen asleep in the hospital chair when Grace quietly asked Sophia, "Are you really our daddy's sister?" "Yes, sweetheart. Your daddy was my twin brother. He would have loved you and Emma so much. Will you love us even when we're not sick anymore? Even when we're not scared?" Sophia felt tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally fall. "I'll love you both forever, Grace. Whether you're sick or healthy, scared or brave, troublesome or perfect. That's what families do." "Promise?" "I promise." Grace smiled. That crooked Blackwell smile that had first captured Sophia's heart in a snowstorm. "Good. Because Emma and I decided we want to stay with you forever." As Grace's health gradually improved, Sophia realized her sister's betrayal had inadvertently given her the greatest gift imaginable. Absolute certainty that her love for these children had nothing to do with genetics and everything to do with choice. 6 weeks after Grace's successful bone marrow transplant, Sophia stood in the office of Dr. Patricia Williams at Independent Genetic Testing Services, a facility chosen specifically because it had no connection to Dr. Webb or Catherine's network of compromised contacts. "The results are definitive," Dr. Williams announced, sliding the official report across her desk. "Emma and Grace Martinez are biological children of David Michael Blackwell with 99.97% certainty. They are your nieces, Ms. Blackwell." Sophia had expected the confirmation, but seeing it in black and white still sent a wave of emotion through her chest. "And their mother? Sarah Elena Martinez, as indicated by the preserved genetic material records from Boston Fertility Solutions. Everything matches perfectly." That evening, Sophia gathered both girls in Grace's hospital room, which had become decorated with get well cards from their new classmates at Brookline Academy and artwork Emma had created during the long treatment days. "I have something important to tell you both," Sophia began, sitting on Grace's bed while Emma curled up beside her. "I know who your daddy was." Both girls went very still. Grace's eyes, much brighter now that her treatment was working, fixed on Sophia's face. "Your daddy was my brother David. His full name was David Michael Blackwell, and he loved the ocean and the environment more than anything in the world. Except your mommy, Sarah." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "So we really are your family? You really are." "And Emma, remember when you asked if I knew your daddy? I did know him. He was my twin brother, my best friend, and the kindest person I ever knew." Grace sat up, straighter in her hospital bed. "Tell us about him." For the next hour, Sophia shared stories she'd never told anyone, about David's obsession with saving endangered marine life, his terrible jokes that made everyone groan, his habit of bringing home stray animals much to their mother's dismay. "He would have been the most wonderful father," Sophia concluded, "and he would have been so proud of how brave you both are." "Is that why we look like you?" Emma asked. "You look like the Blackwell family." David had Grace's crooked smile and Emma's determined chin. You have his eyes, both of you, and his big heart. 3 days later, Catherine appeared at the hospital for the first time since her deception had been exposed. She looked haggard, having spent weeks dealing with federal investigators and corporate lawyers. "I came to apologize," Catherine said, quietly to the girls. "What I did was wrong, and I'm sorry I tried to keep you away from your real family." Grace studied Catherine with the serious expression she'd inherited from David. "Aunt Sophia says you were scared." "I was terrified," Catherine admitted. "I thought losing the company meant losing David's memory. But I was wrong. You two are his real legacy." "Will you be our aunt too?" Emma asked with characteristic directness. Catherine's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for months. "If you'll let me try to earn it." As Grace's discharge date approached, Sophia made arrangements that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier, converting David's old environmental research room into a playroom, enrolling both girls in Brookline Academy permanently, and, most importantly, beginning legal proceedings to formally adopt her nieces. The DNA test had confirmed what her heart had known from that first night in the snowstorm. Emma and Grace belonged with her, and she belonged with them. 3 months later, the Blackwell mansion buzzed with an energy it had never known. Children's laughter echoed through rooms that had stood silent for decades, and Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator that had once held only business memos and takeout menus. Catherine faced the legal consequences of her actions with surprising grace. Federal prosecutors, influenced by her cooperation and genuine remorse, accepted a plea agreement that avoided prison time but required her resignation from all executive positions at Blackwell Industries. "I'll establish a medical trust fund for Grace's ongoing care," Catherine told Sophia during one of their carefully rebuilding conversations. "And I want to fund a nursing scholarship at Boston General in Sarah's name." The corporate restructuring proved more complex than anyone anticipated. Emma and Grace, as David's biological children, were entitled to significant inheritance rights that would activate when they turned 18. Rather than viewing this as a threat, Sophia saw it as an opportunity. "We're bringing in external executives," she announced to the board during a tense meeting where she retained her CEO position by a narrow margin. "The company will remain family-controlled, but we need professional management that isn't compromised by personal conflicts." Margaret, whose testimony had exposed Catherine's deception, received an unexpected promotion to executive assistant and a substantial raise. "I should have spoken up sooner," she told Sophia privately. "Those girls deserved the truth from the beginning." Grace's recovery exceeded all medical expectations. Dr. Rodriguez pronounced her officially in remission, with an excellent long-term prognosis. The little girl who had collapsed in Franklin Park was now strong enough to return to school, though she still required regular checkups and careful monitoring. "She's remarkable," Dr. Rodriguez told Sophia during one of Grace's follow-up appointments. Her resilience and positive attitude definitely contributed to her successful treatment. Emma had grown into her role as protective older sister with fierce dedication. She attended every one of Grace's medical appointments, learned to recognize signs of fatigue or illness, and had become expert at making Grace laugh during difficult moments. "Emma's artistic talent is exceptional," reported Mrs. Wellington from Brookline Academy. "But more importantly, she's shown leadership qualities well beyond her years." She organized the entire second grade to make get-well cards for Grace. The most unexpected change came in Catherine herself. Stripped of corporate power and forced to confront the consequences of her actions, she began attending therapy and volunteering at Boston Children's Hospital. "I spent 6 years trying to preserve David's memory through business success," Catherine told Sophia one evening, while watching the girls build an elaborate fort in the living room. "But his real legacy isn't profits or acquisitions, it's those 2 amazing little girls." "Are you ready to be their aunt?" Sophia asked. "I'm ready to try. Every day." The formal adoption proceedings began in November, exactly 1 year after Sophia had found Emma and Grace in that snowstorm. Judge Patricia Morrison, coincidentally the daughter of Blackwell Industries board chairman Harold Morrison, presided over the hearing. "This is unusual," Judge Morrison admitted, reviewing the complex case file. The biological relationship was initially concealed, then deliberately falsified, then ultimately proven. But what matters most is the best interest of these children. Emma and Grace, dressed in matching blue dresses that brought out their father's eyes, sat quietly while the adults discussed their future. When Judge Morrison asked them directly about their wishes, Emma spoke for both sisters. "We want to stay with Aunt Sophia forever. She promised to love us no matter what, and she keeps her promises." "And you, Grace?" Grace, still thin from her treatments but glowing with renewed health, smiled her crooked Blackwell smile. "She's our family, real family, the kind that doesn't go away." The gavel fell with finality. Adoption granted. Emma and Grace Blackwell, you are now officially the daughters of Sophia Blackwell. As they left the courthouse, Emma tugged on Sophia's hand. "Does this mean we really get to keep your name forever?" "Forever and always," Sophia promised, looking up at the Boston sky where snow was beginning to fall. Gentle flakes that reminded her of another storm, another day when her life had changed completely. 2 years after that life-changing blizzard, the Blackwell mansion had transformed into something David would have loved, a home filled with the sounds of family life. Emma's 9th birthday party was in full swing, with 20 children from Brookline Academy racing through rooms that had once echoed only with corporate discussions and quiet solitude. "Aunt Sophia, watch me," Grace called from the garden where she was demonstrating her latest science experiment to fascinated classmates. At 9 years old, she had inherited David's passion for understanding the natural world, and her bedroom walls were covered with marine biology posters and environmental conservation charts. The David and Sarah Blackwell Foundation had become one of Boston's most respected charitable organizations, funding pediatric leukemia research and providing support for families facing childhood cancer. Emma had insisted on designing the foundation's logo herself, a beautiful watercolor painting of 2 hands reaching toward a sun, representing hope and healing. "She has real artistic talent," said Rebecca Chen, the art teacher Sophia had hired, to give Emma private lessons. "But more than that, she understands how art can heal people. These paintings she's been creating for the children's hospital ward. They're bringing joy to kids going through exactly what Grace experienced." Catherine had slowly, carefully rebuilt her relationship with the family. No longer the driven COO obsessed with corporate control, she had found purpose in managing the foundation's operations and spending her Saturdays reading to children in the hospital's oncology ward. "Grace asked me to teach her about business yesterday," Catherine told Sophia while they watched Emma coach Grace through a particularly challenging art project. "She wants to understand how to run environmental protection companies when she grows up, just like her father." Sophia smiled, remembering David's dreams of using business principles to save the planet. The mansion's most profound change was in Sophia herself. The woman who had once lived for quarterly profit reports now scheduled her days around school pickups, homework help, and bedtime stories. Blackwell Industries continued to thrive under new professional management, but Sophia's priorities had fundamentally shifted. "You know what I love most about our family?" Emma asked one evening as they sat together in what had once been David's research room, now converted into a cozy library where the girls did homework while Sophia worked on foundation business. "What's that, sweetheart?" "We chose each other. You chose to keep us in the snowstorm. We chose to trust you, and even Aunt Catherine chose to say sorry and be better." Grace looked up from her marine biology textbook. "Aunt Maria used to say that the best families aren't born. They're built with love and patience and never giving up on each other." That Saturday evening, as had become their tradition, Sophia took the girls to David's grave at Mount Auburn Cemetery. They brought fresh flowers and Emma's latest paintings to show him. "Daddy would be proud of how brave Grace was during her treatments," Emma said seriously, arranging the flowers with careful precision. "And he'd love that she wants to save the oceans like he did." "He'd be proud of your art too," Grace added. "Aunt Sophia says you paint with the same passion he had for protecting animals." As they walked back to the car through the cemetery's peaceful paths, Grace slipped her hand into Sophia's. "Do you think Daddy and Mommy can see us being happy?" Sophia looked at her daughters, because that's truly what they were now, in every way that mattered, and felt the deep contentment that had replaced the driven ambition of her former life. "I think they see everything," she said. "Your kindness, your courage, your love for each other, and I think they're proud of the family we've become." Emma skipped ahead, then turned back with a grin that was pure David Blackwell. "Race you to the car. Winner gets to pick the movie for tonight." As Sophia chased her daughters through the gathering dusk, their laughter echoing across the quiet cemetery, she realized that success wasn't measured in stock prices or corporate achievements. It was measured in moments like this, in the sound of children who had found their home, in the knowledge that love really could triumph over loss, and in the certainty that some storms don't destroy lives but rather clear the way for something infinitely better. The Blackwell legacy would continue, not through corporate empires or quarterly earnings, but through two remarkable little girls who carried their father's dreams in their hearts and their adoptive mother's unwavering love in their souls.